My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. So I'm going to be open and honest right up front here. So I had to go to a conference this week, and that took up about 20 hours of my time. So I didn't have a lot of time to come up with a good show this week. But then I thought to myself, there might be some people out there that would like to hear this message that I have. Because I've been getting this question over the years a lot. And I thought, I've been thinking about this a lot, so I can probably pretty much do this pretty close off the top of my head. And so the question is this, and I think it's really important, because I don't think that there's a lot of good answers in psychology for this. And the question is, why do so many good, quote unquote, good people, successful people, caring people, tend to get in relationships that are very, very difficult, to where they're pulling most of the weight in the relationship? It's a good question, right? So there's a lot of people out there, whether they are in a romantic relationship, maybe it's a relationship we can call, your job, there's people there, or your boss, or your family. So let's talk about that. Why do good, caring, successful people end up in very difficult or sometimes abusive relationships, or in relationships where someone is, let's say, an alcoholic, or they're on drugs? How does this happen? Why does it happen? Why does the relationship continue? So that's the question for today. One person who did come up with kind of an answer to that, and everybody seemed to jump on that answer, and that's why I want to talk about it today, even though I don't really agree with her, but I think it's important to mention, because most people right now are probably thinking, oh, I know the answer. It's codependence. Of course it is. It's people out there that are overly responsible in relationships, and they try to manage other people, right? And they try to make other people do the right thing. And they've heard about this. Okay, let's have a little bit of a talk. Let's start there. So here's the book, Codependent No More, by Melody Beattie. So I'm just gonna take a couple of excerpts from this, and we'll kind of go from there. One of her thoughts is, she says, these crazy codependents are sicker than the alcoholics that they're with. She says, and no wonder the alcoholic drinks. Who wouldn't with a crazy spouse like that? So this is in psychology, and it's not just in psychology. This is the number one thought of why these relationships happen. She's actually saying the person who's loving and caring is more sick than the alcoholic themselves, right? So if you're the type of person that got married and your vows were for better or for worse, and now you're kind of being made fun of, that you're dysfunctional, that you're there for the part that's worse, there's something wrong with that in psychology, right? That's why some people don't take psychology, they just don't have any thought about it. I know most men I know, run away from psychology because they don't think it makes any sense. And there's a good reason right there. So if you're a person that is very diligent, caring, you hold up to your obligations, you might be called sicker than the alcoholic or drug addict or abusive person. She goes on, this formidable group, these codependents, they're aching, complaining, trying to control everyone and everything. She talks about controlling. So if you have a loved one, we're talking about all relationships here, right? If you have a son or a daughter that's on drugs, are you trying to control them if you're trying to modify their behaviors? In a bad way? Since when did that come to be a bad thing? Interesting, right? She says, many counselors, including me, oh my God, she's a counselor. That's, oh God, you can't make this stuff up. She's a counselor. How in the world did that happen? Okay. But she says, I don't know how to help them. And she's talking about the codependent, right? Supposedly, she's talking about she's not talking about the person with the actual issue. She's talking about the person who cares about the person with the issue, right? Like, that's just insane. She also describes them as racing mindlessly from one activity to another, people pleasers, martyrs, stoics, tyrants, withering vines. Okay, let's say stoics. Stoic philosophy is basically Roman Buddhism. It's been around for over 2,000 years. You know, and the best minds that have ever walked the earth, including like Alexander the Great, right? They were all Stoics. Melody Beattie, of all people, making fun of Stoics, you gotta be kidding me. She doesn't know a thing about what she's talking about. Unfortunately, people get taught this garbage, and now that they're blaming good, caring, successful people for trying to make relationships work. It's insane. You know what? I had enough. We're not going to do that anymore. Let me just go down some of the list of what a lot of therapists, starting from Melody Beattie, believe about why this happens. She says that a person's in a relationship that tries to make it work, whether it's with a romantic partner, again, you're at your job, with your family, it's because you have low self-esteem. And she means globally, like for everything since like the day you were born, you have low self-esteem. Okay, let's just, that's garbage too. But she also says that they have learned helplessness. In other words, they've been in a situation in their life where they don't have any control, and now they are trying to repair. So that now they pick relationships that are not beneficial to them, but they try to repair them to make up for the lack of the actual connection that they had or the attachment in their childhood. So if you don't have a good connection to your mother and father, you choose somebody that's emotionally distant when you get older because you are trying to go through like a repetition compulsion, Freud would say, is that you're trying to redo your childhood that way. Right, okay, you can believe some of that. Some of it might be true, but we'll go on with this. It's not really true. She also says that it comes from unresolved trauma. Sometimes, again, she uses the word, these people are codependents, and that's why they're in these types of relationships. And she also says, she goes on to say that they're relationship addicts. Now, none of this seems to be positive. None of this, she seems to have any respect for a person who's trying to, keep their family together, make sure that they keep up with their obligations as being a parent. It seems to be very abusive if you're a therapist and you think this way. So lo and behold, there happens to be a few studies. So we have these, right? Not just anecdotal, we have empirical work here. And what does it say about good, caring, successful people? Well, it says that all of the things that I just said right now that Melody Beattie believes, 60% of people don't fall into that category. So what could it be? So let's put the 40% to the side. We need to talk to that 60% of people. Again, basic question right from the top. Why do good, caring, loving, successful people have so much difficulty in relationships with people? Because the other people aren't upholding their end of the bargain. That's why. That's the answer. So we need to talk about personality traits. Personality traits are what we call they're permanent and they're pervasive. It basically makes up who you are as a human being. So when we look at the big 5 personality traits, we can remember them with the acronym CANOE or OCEAN, because there's 5. So let's go over them. So O in OCEAN would be openness to experience. The C in OCEAN would be conscientiousness. The E in OCEAN would be extroversion, and the A would be agreeableness, and the last one would be N, neuroticism. So as you're hearing me say this, you could think, like, what would be the gold standard of being probably the best type of person to have a really great long-term relationship with? Like, who would be the Superman and Superwoman of personalities? Now, if you're dating, listen up to this, because these are things that you would want, right? So if you think that a person who is, let's say, open to experience and very extroverted and maybe slightly neurotic, that person probably wouldn't be good for a long-term relationship, right? They might be good for a day or two. And if they're looking for a job, they might be a good sex worker, but they're not really going to be a good, reliable person for a long-term relationship, right? So which would be the two that would be the best to be a good, caring, loving, successful human being, especially in a relationship or especially in certain jobs where you need a lot of responsibility? I'm going to tell you, it would be number one, conscientiousness, and number two, agreeableness. Those are the two. Now, here's the thing. You inherited those. You were born with those. So when Melody Beattie says all this garbage about why do people do these things and it's their fault and it's their problem and there's something wrong with them, you're talking about the two top personality traits that makes a person a really great, quote unquote, a catch. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Agreeableness. It has what we call a lot of facets to it. So let's just, I'm going to read this just in case so there's no discrepancy about what I'm saying here. Agreeableness reflects an individual's differences in concern about cooperation and social harmony. Agreeable individuals value getting along with others. Therefore, they are considerate, friendly, generous, helpful, and willing to compromise their interests with others. Agreeable people also have an optimistic view of human nature. They believe people are basically honest, decent, and trustworthy. Okay, so when you are that good, you can be taken advantage of by a person who is antagonistic, right? Now, if that doesn't make sense, let me put it to you this way. Water is necessary. It's absolutely essential for you to be alive. But it can be used against you because you can drown. Fire, obviously, it cooks our food, it's good for heat, we need it, it's essential. But fire can also kill you. Strength is also a good thing, physical power. But if you know anything about like Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu, the more powerful you are, that can be used against you to hurt your own self. And so that's what we're looking at here. Now, when you look at the agreeableness, we're looking about cooperation and social harmony. Could you see where the harm would be in a person that doesn't really care about you? That's maybe a little bit or a lot antagonistic and is trying to exploit you in some way? That's where the problem is, right? They also say that they are friendly, generous. Again, give, give, give. If somebody doesn't give back, they don't have the empathy that you do, you can see where the harm would be. And they're willing to compromise their interests, which is fine, that's what a relationship is. But can you see where the damage would be if you are compromising too much with someone who's totally not willing to compromise? So there's part of your answer, right? And it doesn't have to do with your low self-esteem. It has to do with you're a good person. That's the answer. They also have an optimistic view of human nature. That means you trust people. That means you give them a chance to hurt you, but then they continue to hurt you. Then you start to feel like, oh my God, like this person has some issues. A person who is generally antagonistic, they already don't trust you. You could be the best person in the world, and they're not going to trust you. And that's why the relationship is not going to go well, because you're dealing with someone who's emotionally distant, and they don't like human beings in general. And again, there you go. There's part of the issue. But you're going to keep trying. Why? Because you're agreeable, and you have a good view of human nature. Let's go on. Here are some of the facets. Again, naturally trusting, optimistic. They have a giving nature. They're willing to compromise and sacrifice for the relationship. And what goes along with that that's really interesting, they tend to be very sentimental and nostalgic. And why is that? Because they love people, right? So they think, okay, so they think everybody who's been in their life at some level that they've learned from. So they have a respect for all people. And if you're an antagonistic person, a person who's very critical of themselves and others, you're always going to be in a fight because you appreciate every human being you've ever been around. And this other person is going to hate that fact, so that becomes very difficult. Agreeableness, another facet. They tend to be very cooperative, hard word to say. They're motivated by peace and harmony, and they assist other people rather than attack. Think about that. So you're in a relationship and someone has a little bit of a down day. You're like, how are you? How can I help? You know, your happiness is my happiness. Do you get that from the other person? Not if they're antagonistic, you don't. Not if they're trying to manipulate you. No. So you have a tendency to give too much. And if you're in the relationship, whether, again, you're at work, whether you're with a family or a romantic partner, you're going to find yourself that you're giving too much because they tend to attack where you want to assist that person. Humbleness. You tend to be gentle, modest, approachable. Nothing more needs to be said there. You're empathetic. You're kind. You're forgiving. You're a peacemaker. What if you're a peacemaker and the person you're with is antagonistic? And I keep using the same word here, antagonistic, because I want you to understand that is on the other side of a person who's, let's say, very nice and caring and empathetic. The opposite would be antagonistic. So what happens here when you're trying to be a peacemaker with someone who's not? It means that you never get peace. It means that you are constantly figuring out how to make that other person happy. You tend to be loyal. You're committed to obligations. What's your obligation? Did you obligate somebody for a certain amount of time at work? Did you obligate through marriage? Did you obligate through saying, I'm going to take care of this person? Did you obligate yourself by saying, I have kids and this is what I'm going to do no matter what? I will never run away from my child no matter how hard the situation is? Because if you do, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a incredible value and virtue. Should be looked up to. But in psychology, a lot of people, it's not. So you'll be put down for it. You'll say, oh, it's unproductive, it's terrible, you need to walk out. It's you got an issue. There's something wrong with you. What else with agreeableness? You tend to be tolerant. Tolerant of what? Differing opinions and behaviors. Because you understand that not everybody's like you. And just because they think differently than you, and sometimes they act differently than you, doesn't make them less than you. But what if you're with a partner that constantly judges you, that says, I would never have handled it like that. You need to handle it like this. You're going to have a lot of strife, for sure. There's going to be a lot of disturbance in your life because they're going to be attacking you a lot. But then you're going to have to try to figure out how to manage that. So let's move on. So that was agreeableness. What's the other trait? Conscientiousness. So let me open this part up here. So I'm just going to read the part. It says the benefits of conscientiousness are obvious. Conscientious individuals avoid trouble and achieve high levels of success through purposeful planning and persistence. They are also positively regarded by others as intelligent and reliable. They have a sense of competence. They have an ability to accomplish things, and they're confident that they can do it. Let's go back to Melody Beattie, who said that people like this have low self-esteem. That's not true, right? I just finished saying they have a confidence in their ability to accomplish things. It's the exact opposite of what's her name says. What's that word? Yeah, she's wrong. That's the answer. Conscientious people, they have a sense of duty and obligation. So they're doing it because they want to, and they uphold their end of the bargain. They make contracts. They don't just run away when things get difficult. They have self-discipline, which is called willpower by many people. It refers to the ability to persist at difficult and unpleasant tasks until they are completed. Think about that last sentence again. They persist at difficult and unpleasant tasks until they're completed. So if you're at a job and you said, this is my job, I live here, I work here, I live in this town, this is what I'm going to do, and yet you're taking a lot of garbage from your boss and you keep putting up with it because you see the greater good in it, because you want to see a task completed, Maybe your mother or father doesn't treat you well, and you're like, well, they gave me life. I'm not going to ever say anything negative about my parents. Even though I have trouble with them, I'm still going to speak to them, until they die. It's, again, completing tasks. Orderliness, they're well organized, they're tidy, neat. They also score high in striving to achieve excellence. Their drive to be recognized as successful keeps them on track as they work hard to achieve goals. If their goal is to be a good person and not to hurt people, not to exploit people, you can see why they would stay in these relationships and try harder and harder, as opposed to just walking out when things get difficult. They tend to be deliberate. Cautiousness describes the disposition to think carefully through possibilities before acting. Again, what are the possibilities? A person who's not conscientious, they act by just acting out. They go to drink, they do drugs, they use physical violence, they use emotional violence, they walk out. People who are conscientious and agreeable don't do that. And then we have Melody Beattie blaming the person who is trying to be a good person. You see where I'm going with this? So more on conscientiousness. They're dependable, they're reliable, they're committed to a fault. They're overly responsible. They tend to also to cooperate to make things better for both sides. But what would Melody Beattie say about cooperation, right? She would say that it's people-pleasing. I say cooperation is good. I say sharing is good. She would also say that that's people-pleasing. And self-discipline and deliberateness, we already went over that. So to sum this up, again, the question would be, why do good, caring, loving, and again, successful? Because they tend to be really good at their jobs, right? Like I'll get this too, like I'll have a doctor, a lawyer. I don't want to give up any names, but I've had more than one, let's say, more than I want to count though. Like a lot of dentists too, like very successful people doing amazing things who are very, very, very caring people. They're very agreeable. They're very conscientious. They want to make things better. They don't quit. And yet they are in horrific relationships, whether it's with their partner of choice or whether sometimes it's at their work that they're not being treated correctly, and they're like, oh, I can manage this, I can do this. If I just act just enough here and this, I can cooperate, I can figure out a way to make it work for everybody. We're all on the same team. Or with their parents, who may have pushed them maybe too hard, which is good to push your child, but if you don't have the love on the other side, the child grows up with, okay, I'm going to do this to make money, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do these things, but then they don't feel loved, so they're very hollow, or at least when it comes to looking at their parents. They don't look at their parents with, necessarily this incredible love and support that they've gotten, because they don't feel like that. They feel like they were pushed, and maybe they did get successful because of the pushing, but they don't feel the love and connection on the other side, so there's a disconnect. So again, the answer to this is, why do loving, caring, good, successful people sometimes get in relationships, whether at work or otherwise, romantic, family? Why do they have such difficult relationships? It's because the other people are not at your level. They can't uphold the end of the bargain that you can. And because you know that you have strived and to reach success in many areas of your life, you think that other people can too. And the truth is that they can if they tried hard enough. If they tried hard enough. But you're optimistic. So you're waiting for when they do it. Because you're afraid to walk away. You're afraid to quit. Because that's not part of your psyche. 60% of people fall into the area of being super traded. They're not low self-esteem. They don't have learned helplessness. Doctors, lawyers, business people, dentists, the people that I know, they're not suffering from learned helplessness. Melody Beattie needs to just be quiet, never write another word again. She's hurting people. None of that is true. It's garbage. It's garbage. More than 60% of the people are what I say that they are. They're super traded. They were born nature. They were born with a high trait of agreeableness and conscientiousness. And then through the way they see the world, or maybe even a little bit of nurture, they've amped that up, and then they've seen the success in their life, and they've even amped up their conscientiousness and agreeableness even more. So that's all I have to say for today. Hopefully that was helpful in some way. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare today. So anyway, that's the best I could do. My name is Joe Peroni. Please subscribe if you found any of that good. Send it to some people. That would be nice. Thank you.